The beloved Mexican poet Octavio Paz once wrote that the word death is not spoken in New York, in Paris, or London, because it burns the lips. The Mexican, in contrast, is familiar with death, jokes about it, caresses it, sleeps with it, celebrates it. True, there is as much fear in his attitude as in that of others, but at least death is not hidden away. He looks at it face to face, with impatience, disdain, or irony. At no time is their collective attitude toward death more on display than when Mexico celebrates its Day of the Dead, Día de Muertos. In the heart of Mexico City, the country's main square, the Zócalo, is decorated with skeletons and other imagery of death, ready for the festivities to begin. But the Day of the Dead is changing. The country's recent wave of murder and other untimely deaths are not exactly the kind of passing from one world to the next that inspires celebration. Because of this, the Day of the Dead is becoming more somber and more political. Altars in public squares express public discontent with causes not receiving enough attention, like mounting deaths from diabetes. Because murders by drug cartels are more spectacular, uneven media coverage has created the impression that many Mexicans die violent deaths. But what most people don't realize is that many times more people die from type 2 diabetes, a so-called lifestyle disease that is now Mexico's #1 killer.
We are at the Jamaica market, one of the 5 largest markets in Mexico City, and it's very crowded today because we are about to celebrate the Day of the Dead in Mexico. People come to the markets and buy flowers, buy candies, pan de muerto, which is the bread they make for these dates especially, and they use all those elements in the altars.
The families, they gather. Everybody's decorating, everybody's helping the little babies, everybody's getting involved. The way we do it is that the food that they used to like the most. Also, some beverages, some maybe like tequila or mezcal, it depends, you know, on the people that what they enjoy.
Mi papá él padeció de su diabetes, 25 años. Él tenía su carnicería. Él comía bastante carne, más que verduras, muy poco. Y la coca.
Que están visitando aquí a la tumba de mi suegra. Estamos aquí con ella acompañándola, toda la familia de ella. Aquí están sus hijos, sus nietos, sus bisnietos y tataranietos. Todos estamos aquí con ella muy contentos. A ella le gustaba comer, pues comía su pizza, corundas rellenas, chayotes, calabaza, fruta de toda. y su coquita que no le faltaba. Y pues yo también, por eso salí así diabética. Mi papá de eso falleció también y mi mamá lo tiene, una hermana, un hermano, 3 hermanos, 4 hermanos lo tienen también. Toda la familia casi.
In the early 2000s, one of my first articles was studying diabetes mortality because it was not well characterized in the country. So I took the registries since the 80s and analyzed the trend in diabetes. In Mexico, there was this perception that diabetes was a problem of the US, that we had other kind of problems. But when I made the graphic and I showed that we had, even then, a much higher mortality due to diabetes and much more steeper than the one in the US, well, it was really hard to publish that article. It was rejected. Now, almost 18 years after this first article, we just confirmed what we were observing. There was an inflection point at the early 2000s in which diabetes really increased. Right now, the trend has maintained and is the #1 cause of mortality. In Mexico, many people with diabetes, when you ask them why they have diabetes, they think it's because they had a very strong impression. They were scared by something, and that causes in them the disease.
Lo mismo un susto o un coraje es lo mismo porque cae al cuerpo, a la sangre, pues, y luego se pone uno mal.
Susto. It means a shock, a scare. It is a folk belief that a severe fright or trauma can cause physical symptoms. The majority of people in Mexico still believe that susto causes diabetes.
El susto, it's a disease that can be described as a socio-cultural illness. Many people believe it comes from the indigenous traditions. The closest equivalence to el susto would be extreme grief, a type of sadness that occurs because of a traumatic event in your life.
Yo tenía 53 años cuando me detectaron la diabetes. Tengo una hermana que también lo padece y también mi mamá murió de diabetes. Pues yo creo que la diabetes me la causó por la mala alimentación, pero también tengo la duda de que también los sustos. Y una vez tuve un problema muy fuerte con una de mis hijas que está casada. Nos secuestraron, la gente del pueblo fue a rescatarnos allá al rancho donde estaba pues mi hija. Y entonces yo esa vez sí me espanté muy feo, yo todavía no la tenía, todavía no me la detectaban. Y de ahí yo empecé con mucha sed.
In Mexico and Central America, el susto is like your soul, for a moment your soul left your body. No? This is a folk belief.
El susto se viene porque en cuestión de enfermedades, coraje, sorpresas, o le dicen tu mamá ya se murió, ese se viene el susto. El susto en cuestión también de a veces del terremoto.
En los cambios hay buenas y malas. Entonces el alma se sale del cuerpo.
Este trabajo que yo hago lo traigo desde que nací, veo las cosas y veo cómo están mi gente y cómo vive mi gente. Mi trabajo es sanación y espiritual, espanto, dolor de espalda, cansancio, estrés y todas las enfermedades se puede quitar con esto. Esto es para que esté bien y se centre tu alma.
There's a cultural toolkit of how you understand the world in your community, and they're using that to talk about a new disease. In communities where there's rapid changes in the environment that people are not able to really process. They're saying, well, it was el susto that's causing my diabetes. No, el susto might be a way of how people make sense of how their lives are being disrupted.
La mala alimentación. Y luego ya el susto, pues ahí se me disparó ya el azúcar, que dicen que todos traemos el azúcar, pero que ya en alto nivel con cualquier cosa se dispara.
The next thing we try to do is to try to identify what were the causes of this very acute increase on diabetes. We found these income expenditure surveys that are done by the economic ministries. We could check at the food, and the expenditures in fruits and vegetables were decreasing about 30%. And at the same time, sugar-sweetened beverage increased about 40%.
Because of NAFTA, we are importing a lot of this food.
We are essentially exporting our processed food industry into countries that have never seen it before. The foods that are being exported are extremely high in calories relative to their nutritional value. One company after another, all are reporting that their growth in profits is coming from developing countries.
Now we are drinking more sodas like Coke. You will see it everywhere. Industrialized bread instead of having more natural things like the pan de muerto, for example.
People have much less time to cook. If you don't have anything else, you can drink a Coke. It gets you through the day.
There are two types of diabetes. Type 1 is an autoimmune disease. Most people with diabetes have type 2, where the body doesn't make enough or is resistant to insulin, so sugar builds up in the blood. In the past, type 2 diabetes was called adult onset diabetes, but now even children are getting the disease.
All of the diseases of alcohol, type 2 diabetes, fatty liver disease, and brain problems, we are now seeing in children. And they don't drink alcohol. But boy, oh boy, do they consume sugar. Sugar is toxic, unrelated to its calories. Sugar is the alcohol of the child.
Since women are now getting diabetes during their childbearing years, it is interfering with pregnancy and limiting family size.
Cuando yo me embaracé sí me regañaron los doctores porque no debía de haberme embarazado, sabiendo que ya tenía el azúcar porque pues era riesgo para mí y para el bebé.
If I had a magic wand, I would change the word type 2 diabetes. No one knows what it means. I would change type 2 diabetes in all governmental materials and in medical textbooks, etc., to what it really is, processed food disease. Call it what it is.
Mexico is one of the biggest consumers of sugary drinks per capita. So it's no surprise that Mexico has by far the highest rate of death from sugary drinks of any country in the world.
It's natural for humans to like sweet foods and sweet drinks. It's part of our biology. However, we have reached a point in which our consumption is too high to be compatible with health. It's too high. countries where there is a consumption of 4 liters of soda per capita per year, say, okay, well, it's not a big issue, but we are one of the 4 top consumers of soda in the world, 167 liters per capita per year. It was not like this in Mexico, never. This all happened in the last 20 to 30 years.
Marketing works, and nobody does it better than the soda industry, which spends billions of dollars per year on marketing, even though their products are already the most widely known on Earth.
Right now, at this point in time in the United States, people consume more soft drinks than any other liquid, including ordinary tap water. If we take full advantage of our opportunities, someday, not too many years into our 2nd century, we will see the same wave catching on in market after market, until eventually the #1 beverage on earth will not be tea or coffee or wine or beer. It will be soft drinks, our soft drinks.
Coca-Cola is the world's most widely distributed single product, or it certainly has been through most of its history. Coca-Cola was invented in 1886. It was just one of many patent medicines that were known as nerve tonics to replenish your nervous energy. After World War II, Coca-Cola consumption exploded all over the place. Someone was in a taxi driving across the Sahara Desert in 1950. He asked the taxi driver, when will we reach the limits of civilization? And the taxi driver said, well, it depends on how you define that. What do you mean? He said, well, when will we not be able to see a Coca-Cola advertising sign or get a Coca-Cola? And he said, never. Mexico was just one of the places where it exploded. There were few regulations in Mexico. They were right next to America, obviously, and a flood of Coca-Cola went into Mexico.
The convenience stores are all around the country, even in the most remote areas. We are finding that in poor rural areas, the increase in this type of products is higher than in the rest of the country. Access is very easy.
Mi coca yo me la compro ahí abajo, hay tiendas, hay una tienda y hay otra, y a lo mejor si estuvieran más lejos no iba. Tomaba en la mañana mi coca grande, pues, de 2 litros, y a mediodía iba por otro para la comida, y en la noche otra vez. Yo sentía que nada más eso me quitaba la sed. Hay mucho niño chiquito que lo toma desde chiquito.
Me impacta mucho, y sobre todo más ahora, ver cómo las mujeres indígenas le están dando refresco a los bebés. Desde chiquitos, ¿no? Dices, putz, es un crimen eso.
Mothers who were concerned that their children would get dysentery from polluted water, which is a huge problem in developing countries, knew that if they fed their babies Coca-Cola, that they would not get ill from it.
There's a lot of contamination. There are neighborhoods and areas that had intermittent water services. There is a correlation between very bad quality water services and increased consumption or reliance on other sources of hydration, and soft drinks are one.
It's very ineffective to tell children to drink water when they do not have access to water. And this is something that you can see also all over Mexico.
Roberto Goizueta, who was one of the most successful CEOs that Coca-Cola had and who was a native Cuban, used to talk about stomach share.
Everything that we used to do revolves and pivots around per capita consumption. It is critical that I get more ounces per day into more people. As simplistic as I can say it, it is per capita consumption. The data comes in that way. How I think about consumer segments, how I think about target segments is all based on how much of my product can I get into their stomachs per day.
They're not talking just about competing with Pepsi. They're talking about any kind of liquid that you consume. Ultimately, a frightening goal in life to have.
Increasingly health-conscious consumers north of the border means that the share of stomach for sugary drinks in the U.S. is down, while water is up. That's making a dent in soda company profits.
Per capita consumption of those drinks has been declining for 15 years. Coke and Pepsi in particular are very concerned.
You want to check out a cup of happiness here? Sure. All right, let's do it. Get this Coke going. We got sparkling water. Now, we actually need 10 packets of sugar. Get some caramel food coloring. Now, does that look familiar? Soda, right?
Will you guys just give us plain water afterwards?
In the U.S., it is a large market for them. They see soda sales declining, and so they do what a good corporate executive would do and look for other markets.
If you're not operating in Mexico, you may be missing a very significant opportunity.
We've invested about $1 billion in Mexico for each of the last 8 years. It's our #2 market in the world, behind the US, but it's bigger than China, it's bigger than India, it's bigger than Brazil. We've got 12 bottlers. We've got about 64, 65 plants in the country. We've got almost 400 distribution points in the country. It's a phenomenal combination.
They've been very, very good at making the Coca-Cola logo part of the landscape and part of what is simply there, everywhere. They will provide free paint to anybody who wants to paint a Coca-Cola mural on the side of their building.
That's why a lot of people in Mexico feel that Coca-Cola it's a local product because it has been there for such a long time. And people identify it with a period of growth and modernization in Mexico.
They bring to bear all the techniques they could think of television advertising, free samples, and putting their brands everywhere. What they aim for is brand indoctrination, teaching people, this is the brand you get, and then brand loyalty.
It is in TV all the time, it is on the internet. Even in front of the Institute of Public Health, there is a big advertisement of soda. The supermarkets are full of a very big offer of soda, but not only in the soda section. The fruit section is sponsored by the soda companies, so people go to buy fruits and they end up buying the big Zeppelins, that's the name in Mexico, the big Zeppelins of 3 or 4 liters of soda.
In Mexico, they sell 3-liter bottles. That's amazing. I'm sure it's a matter of economy and if you have a large family, etc., but it's not good to sell that much sugar all at once.
When they get kids accustomed to seeing the Coke logo or Pepsi logo in some countries, that kids then think of that as part of the normal diet and part of the normal kind of marketing environment. And then they may drink that product forever.
As soon as they turn 12, I'm like a rabid dog on a something. I'm trying to grab that person and then get them into the brand because, again, the lifetime value of that person in virtually any kind of marketing is really, really important, especially one that once you get into a product, you don't switch.
Most of the schools used to sell soda and the sport facilities, and sometimes the whole school was painted with the soda logo, so that was a very common practice.
When I was a child, when I feel thirsty, the first thing I'm looking for was a soda, a Coca-Cola. Even when we finish our match of football, we look to the market for our Coca-Cola. Something better, something cool, yeah, to drink Coca-Cola.
Cuando iniciamos el trabajo del poder del consumidor en 2006-2007, una de nuestras primeras demandas fue que se regulara la publicidad dirigida a niños. Uno de los factores que se sabe que influyen, no es el único, pero que influyen fuertemente, son estas campañas multimillonarias de las industrias de la chatarra, dirigidas específicamente a los niños.
Most people don't realize the U.S. government sued Coca-Cola over the caffeine content in 1911. Children were drinking this caffeinated beverage. It was addictive. And so Coca-Cola certainly didn't stop trying to appeal to children, but they stopped showing children under the age of 12 in their ads consuming a Coca-Cola. Instead, they had cute little polar bears or birds or other non-human infants consuming their product.
The soda companies have always resisted calls for government regulation on marketing to children, preferring instead self-regulation and voluntary guidelines.
Tienen todo el dinero del mundo para tener psicólogos, etnólogos, hacer neuromarketing. Es decir, la publicidad es muy fuerte, la que se hace a los niños, y es muy persuasiva.
Christmas calls for cartons of Coke in your house.
I think the most brilliant thing they did was when they co-opted Santa Claus as a Coca-Cola drinker. We all know that you're supposed to leave cookies for Santa on Christmas Eve, but Coca-Cola managed to make it that you leave cookies and Coke for Santa. It's become a huge marketing ploy for them, not just in the United States, but around the world where Santa Claus is popular.
Es una total incongruencia que el gobierno de la Ciudad de México haga un acuerdo para que el árbol de Navidad que está en el zócalo del país. ¿Qué está haciendo el gobierno de esta ciudad? ¿A qué intereses está sirviendo? ¿Está sirviendo a los intereses de la salud pública o está sirviendo a los intereses de las grandes corporaciones como Coca-Cola que están pagando estudios?
Nosotros usamos tanto la información, elaboramos documentos, hacemos conferencias de prensa, hacemos foros académicos, pero también para comunicar a través de los medios de comunicación. A veces es importante crear imágenes. Esa acción fue el Día de Muertos. Atrás está el edificio de la Secretaría de Salud y bueno, una crítica al gobierno de que no está haciendo nada para evitar esta situación. Sentimos que ese era un dato muy fuerte para transmitir una situación, un drama humano. También hicimos algo que era cómico por un lado, pero que también estaba dando un mensaje.
Cada 2 horas mueren 5 personas a causa de las complicaciones originadas por la diabetes. El oso polar, la empresa de El Oso Polar, se comprometió a no realizar publicidad para menores de 12 años. Sin embargo, el año pasado realizó una campaña de superhéroes que incluía imágenes de niños jugando a ser superhéroes.
Es hora de ponerles un alto.
Y fue una colaboración con actores. Se hizo un video que tuvo cientos de miles de vistas.
Se ha impuesto en las mesas de las familias mexicanas, ocultando el daño que significan sus altas concentraciones de azúcar.
Está ahí el oso de Coca-Cola, del cartel de la chatarra. Primero hay que generar conciencia del problema. Y eso es una de las maneras, ¿no? Después hablar de qué es lo que está causando el problema y después presentar una de las soluciones al problema.
Obviously, some people who drink a lot of soda do not develop diabetes, do not develop heart disease, don't become obese. You know, there's that genetic factor. But looking at the population as a whole, people who drink more soda have a greater incidence of diabetes and heart disease, obesity, and you start seeing inklings of that in teenage years, and then when people get into their 30s to 60s, then you see this epidemic of type 2 diabetes and all the medical consequences. That is playing Russian roulette with your diet.
Vivo con la enfermedad desde hace 20 años. La enfermedad la padeció mi padre y murió de ello. Y en la actualidad mi madre también tiene diabetes y tengo 2 hermanos que también la tienen.
My mother spent 10 days in the emergency room and was so difficult because the money stuff is really hard to, you know. I'm worried about myself. My father is diabetic too. I try to change my habits of nutrition because I realize all the problems in my family. I stopped to drink soda 1 year and 1 month ago. I had the date. I know that I do not have diabetes if I take care of it. But I think the hardest thing is that you try to change, but your environment is the same.
Soda's detrimental health effects can be seen at all income levels, but they hit Mexico's poorest the hardest. The rural poor have the worst access to health care and can least afford the treatments, the loss of income, disability, and early death that come when the disease is not properly controlled. Mexico's universal healthcare system, Seguro Popular, was designed to treat critical illness and contagious diseases, not the epidemic of chronic diseases that are widespread today.
Even 2 administrations ago, you could not identify the actions for chronic disease in the National Health Plan.
That system is working over capacity. There's not enough public money to support the costs. Seguro Popular does not cover dialysis. People struggle to pay for it or go without the treatment. No? So it's not just the mortality, it's the everyday suffering.
And when diabetics don't properly manage their blood sugar levels, complications set in. Amputations, blindness, kidney failure. Many people have never been tested for diabetes, so they don't even know that they have it. Volunteer groups have set up what are called diabetes clubs to test and monitor people with diabetes in the Yucatan Peninsula.
I'm trained as a diabetes educator in the States, and in January 2006, we came down here with 8 people. Much of our work is done in Mayan communities, and we tested 500 people in Playa and 500 people in Cozumel, and we did foot exams, and we came with 150 meters, and we gave meters to people with diabetes, and we came down this time with 4,000 test strips, and we'll test maybe 1,000 people before we leave.
For many, just tracking their blood sugar is too costly. Test strips cost around $1 each. Testing 3 times per day would cost more than half of one's $5 daily wage.
She's taking hormones. Okay.
In Mexico, where machismo is prized, men have a special reason to get tested. Erectile dysfunction is a common symptom of untreated diabetes.
Most men are reluctant because we don't want to know. We don't want to be concerned if we have it.
But you could lose your sex life by having diabetes and not controlling
it. Fasting blood sugar levels should be under 120. Levels higher than that wreak havoc on the body's kidneys, heart, eyes, limbs.
High blood sugars are the #1 cause of blindness in adults, are the #1 cause of amputations in adults. And we've been to many of these events and people have had their toes cut off and they have no idea that it's related to their diabetes. We're trying to help people understand that having a Coca-Cola, which has this much sugar in it, is not healthy.
Dorothy Rising worked with locals to establish diabetes clubs that continue to provide regular testing and free supplies to diabetics to enable them to manage their disease.
Pero su azúcar hoy está muy bien, está en 102, entonces está muy bien. Solamente su presión, doña.
Volunteers like Claudia continue to visit villages and towns on a weekly basis.
152, don José. Sí. ¿Hace cuántos años te diagnosticaron con diabetes?
11 años.
11 years. ¿Qué pensaste cuando te diagnosticaron diabetes?
¿Qué pensé? Pensé que me iba a morir.
She thought she was going to die.
Claudia first got involved when her goddaughter developed diabetes. She showed up at one of the diabetes clubs to learn more.
The municipality has set these little clinics. A lot of them don't even have a doctor. They just have somebody to look over people that are diabetic. There's no money for medicine. The hospitals don't have medicine. So what we do is we give them their medication for 1 week so that they come back and get tested again. Because if not, they just take the medication and don't come back until they are not feeling well or until they don't have medication and they're not tested. ¿Tu familia tiene una historia de diabetes?
Sí, desde mi abuela materna, ella falleció por diabetes, le cortaron el pie y no, nunca curó el pie y falleció. Para yo poder tener un bebé sano, tuve que controlar mi diabetes y yo la controlé con la alimentación y con ejercicio.
I have tried to tell them that the biggest and the best medicine is their diet. It's very, very complicated. They don't understand the disease. They just don't get it.
La Coca-Cola se ha vuelto un elemento cultural en muchas comunidades. Sí, entonces se requiere mucha información y muchas campañas. No es solamente una cuestión de información, la información es importante, pero se necesita cambiar los ambientes.
The food industry will very often say education is the solution to the problem, but they know very well that government can never pay for enough of it, and the industry can outspend government in a split second. So that's really a trap to believe that education is the only way to address this problem.
We tried public awareness, so we developed the healthy beverage jar, which recommends kids and families to drink mostly water and liquids without sugar. The recommendation for soda is 0. And this had a huge opposition by industry.
Sin embargo, hubo cierto conflicto con la industria que ejerció un poco de presión para que esto no se difundiera y no se hiciera una campaña al respecto. La industria estuvo muy organizada y en contra de esta iniciativa.
This is one of the kind of oppositions that we received to a very, very simple attempt to promote education about healthy hydration.
We've got a very close relationship and partnership with the Mexican government. You know, we look for this triangle, quite honestly, of government, company, and civil society, this kind of golden triangle to kind of come together. You know, we say we can do very well by doing good, and I think to have a progressive and very interested partner in the government of Mexico is critical for us as how we think about our investment there over the long term.
Coke was in the market first, in the Mexican market, way before Pepsi. It was extremely competitive, extremely aggressive, the way you competed for market share and for profits. But I can tell you that my first donations that I got to start moving in politics came from people of Coca-Cola So I got a lot of support. They contributed to my campaign at the very beginning.
Vicente Fox was president of Mexico from 2000 to 2006. During his term as president, he appointed a former Coke director to be the National Water Commissioner, and together they worked to privatize the country's water supply. The bottling giant FEMSA was able to buy 27 concessions, giving them exclusive rights to rivers and aquifers for only $29,000. Coke, FEMSA, adopted more and more aggressive marketing and sales strategies. It commissioned people to deliver bottles, campaigned against locally produced colas, contracted with the schools, threatened store owners selling competing drinks, and routinely sold their addictive soda at prices below that at which they sold water. Soon, the whole world's attention would become focused on what was happening in Mexico. Between 1994, when the NAFTA trade agreement was signed, and 2006, when Fox left office, diabetes in Mexico had doubled. Alarmed by the statistics, the country's leading nutrition scientists advised focusing on one thing: soda consumption. The beverage companies who objected to their products being demonized began a campaign to deflect blame, saying the real problem was lack of exercise. Behind the scenes, they sponsored programs promoting more physical activity, like the Global Energy Balance Network.
Most of the focus in the popular media and in the scientific press is, oh, they're eating too much, eating too much, eating too much, blaming fast food, blaming sugary drinks, and so on. And there's really virtually no compelling evidence that that in fact is the cause.
And to endear themselves to the public, they sponsored activities to suggest that their sugary beverages can be part of a healthy lifestyle.
When we launched the initiatives to discuss soda, I went to speak to the Congress 10 times in 6 years. And there was always someone from industry or sponsored by industry to just give the exact opposite message to ours.
It's not like the corporations have to prove that sugar and sugary drinks don't cause obesity. They just have to cast doubt on that. And that's enough to make a politician who's leaning in their direction bend over.
So much of nutrition science now is being funded by industries with a vested interest in how that science comes out.
The soda companies are investing in research. The investigators asked the question, are sugary drinks related in any way to obesity, type 2 diabetes? And 26 studies said no, they don't have any relation to obesity or diabetes at all. And every single one of those studies was funded by the soda industry.
The soda industry is particularly adept at it and has funded literally dozens of studies to show that you can drink as much soda as you want and it doesn't make any difference.
It's very hard with education to have this kind of impacts given the amount of resources that soda companies are investing in this country. So we knew from the experience with tobacco that adding a soda tax should have results fast.
During this time, Fox's successor, President Calderón, was focusing his attention and government resources on a failed war on drugs. But when a new president took office in 2012, health advocates saw a political window of opportunity. They introduced the idea of a tax on soda to deal with both the health crisis and the huge financial needs for the new administration. The national healthcare system was facing bankruptcy. In light of the worsening crisis, a soda tax measure was introduced in Congress by the opposing conservative political party.
Actualmente estamos gastando 60,000 millones de pesos cada año, que es 3 veces más que el presupuesto de la UNAM anual, solamente en atender las consecuencias de la obesidad y sobrepeso.
The public health authorities were facing reduced budgets, less funding, and more patients. They began pushing for a way of trying to raise money so the public sector could cope, and it is going to go bankrupt if there's not any type of reform.
The different economic challenges, but also environmental challenges like the earthquake, the rains and hurricanes, these kind of challenges absorb many of these resources. There have been cuts in the budget to health in the last years.
Pues es inaugurar esta planta de la industria refresquera que...
But the new president, Enrique Peña Nieto, had cozy ties to the soda industry.
Les puedo decir que el presidente de la República toma Coca-Cola todos los días. Coca-Cola Light.
La industria tiene representantes dentro de los 3 partidos políticos, pero dentro del mío, que es el PAN, también teníamos una senadora que es dueña de una refresquera muy importante. Hubo reticencias de mi coordinador en ese entonces para que se presentara esta iniciativa. Sin embargo, la logré presentar, que fue el primer logro, y empezó la lucha por que se pudiera aprobar.
El impuesto a las bebidas azucaradas tiene 2 objetivos básicos. El primero, desincentivar el consumo de refrescos y otras bebidas perjudiciales a la salud que favorecen estas enfermedades. El segundo objetivo del impuesto es el de generar los recursos suficientes para financiar políticas públicas eficaces.
A diverse coalition of nonprofits and health scientists came together to support a 20% tax on sugary beverages.
In front of this situation, we create an alliance of different NGOs that work in very different issues.
Tuve la visita de la industria, tuve la visita también de los pequeños comerciantes, la Asociación de Pequeños Comerciantes. Las refresqueras los tomaron como aliados en esta lucha, a unos diciéndoles que no iban a vender.
Con Mexico and the Beverage Industry Association lobbied hard against the tax.
They represent not just Coca-Cola, not just FEMSA, they represent all of the processed food companies.
But opposition also came from unexpected places. Instead of getting behind the soda tax proposal as a public health strategy, the Minister of Health declined to get involved. And the Mexican Diabetes Federation? They opposed the soda tax too.
La directora de la federación ahora trabaja con Coca-Cola. Esa es otra de las estrategias que utiliza la industria.
Despite the overwhelming need for action to stem the twin epidemics of obesity and diabetes, the tax proposal was quickly defeated in just 10 days. Still, the revenue collection possibilities alone made a soda tax irresistible to President Peña Nieto. The Finance Ministry started to look at the soda tax as part of a package of financial reforms. President Peña Nieto put his support behind a new soda tax proposal put forward by his finance minister. Then, the media battle began.
otras noticias, las agrupaciones civiles Alianza por la Salud Alimentaria y el Poder del Consumidor demandaron al Congreso de la Unión aprobar el impuesto a los refrescos.
Hemos propuesto un impuesto al refresco con una sexta parte de lo que ingresaría al erario público. Sería suficiente para meter bebederos de agua con todos sus sistemas de purificación en más de 120,000 escuelas de educación básica. Tenemos que parar a estas empresas que hacen campañas en contra de que la población esté informada.
Es muy poco el porcentaje que aportan los refrescos en la dieta de los mexicanos, que es de más de 3,000 calorías. Entonces, si le ponemos el impuesto a los refrescos, lo único que va a pasar es subir el precio.
Es mejor ponerse a pensar en bajarse los sueldos los funcionarios, que en vez de estar buscando cómo sacar dinero para la gente.
Creo que no resuelve el problema, pero creo que podría ser un buen avance para tener una medida recaudatoria que permita tener un impacto.
The only way, I think, to really address the issue is by making consumers responsible of their decisions. It's the consumer who should be responsible for the diet that he or she selects and conforms.
Tobacco was a terrible public health catastrophe until government began paying attention to the problem and passing laws and enacting policies that help curb tobacco use, because the government began to see smoking not as a personal problem, but as a public health problem.
The industry is very concerned about being thrown in the same bucket as the tobacco industry. And they're concerned about their sales, and they do everything they can to oppose efforts to reduce consumption, because they know the higher the tax, the higher the price, the lower the sales.
El impuesto a refresco, todas las proyecciones indican que va a bajar el consumo.
Es un vicio que tenemos. Mientras nos siga alcanzando, lo seguiremos comprando.
¿Va a consumir menos? Yo pienso, ¿no? Está bien.
A public opinion poll revealed that 70% of Mexicans supported the tax if a portion of the revenues would be earmarked for water fountains in schools.
Veo niños y niñas con obesidad todos los días.
Sé cuál será su futuro.
Diabetes, enfermedades del corazón, cáncer.
Se trata de una epidemia y podemos prevenirla.
The Nutritional Alliance produced a slick TV commercial for the public airwaves, but met with a setback.
Reduciremos la obesidad. El dinero se...
The TV companies are not obligated to sell airtime because a lot of the advertisers are for consumer products. It's good business not to antagonize your clients.
In the end, the Alliance was forced to rely on other methods to get their message across.
Ellos estaban muy confiados en que no iba a pasar hasta que lo tomó el presidente Peña.
In October 2013, the soda tax passed. Public health advocates did not get the 20% soda tax they wanted, but Congress approved a 10% tax on sugary beverages and an 8% tax on junk food.
It's a miracle that the soda tax was passed in 2013 as the first national tax in the world, I believe. It just shows you how dire the situation in Mexico was, I think.
When the soda tax passed, it was a surprise for everyone because we had many years trying to and proposing soda taxes, but this was like a window of opportunity for a tax.
Most countries are not doing anything. Mexico is different, which is extraordinary.
It was a combination of alliances, the way they lobbied for the soda tax. That's something that was going to be beneficial for the health system.
And we know it's only a step. We don't think it's a solution, but we think it's causing a domino effect.
There usually is a tipping point in a society where suddenly what seemed unthinkable becomes the reality. And so I suspect that we will have more and more soda taxes passed.
Mexico's success inspired other countries around the world to pass a soda tax.
This is bold and brave, so it just makes me very excited because look, ultimately it's about stop the talking, stop the bad news, let's fix it.
In the US, cities also began to pass measures. The first was Berkeley, California.
We got the measure passed. Woo!
Philadelphia and Seattle would soon follow, but faced contentious fights, with opposition led by front groups heavily financed by the beverage industry.
There are a lot of things going on that hopefully will spread.
We have great food label in Chile. You don't have to know how to read to understand it.
Restaurants in Baltimore can no longer sell sugary drinks to children. A new ordinance says soda cannot be offered on the kids' menu. Only water, milk, and 100% fruit juice.
With the soda tax, the results have been very positive. For example, in the first year of implementation, we were able to document an important reduction of about 7% or even more of the consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages, and at the same time, an increase in water consumption. It was even higher the second year.
Afraid that Mexico's success would create an unwanted precedent, the soda industry planned a counterattack. Hacked emails obtained by US food activists revealed the extent of Coke's global anti-soda tax strategy. Coca-Cola Europe internal documents showed that the world's largest sugary drinks company sees the soda tax as the measure most likely to cause harm to its business.
When a city or a country passes a law that has the effect of reducing consumption, the big companies will just double down, market harder, figure out how can we get around this.
In Mexico, a year after enactment, the soda industry and its friends in Congress led an effort to cut the tax in half. Public health activists held the line. They stopped the effort to reduce the tax to only 5%.
The companies have invested enormous amounts of money in the United States and Mexico to beat back soda taxes. So they're willing to spend millions of dollars to fight soda taxes if it saves hundreds of millions of dollars worth of sales.
Organizaciones civiles y senadores del PRD pidieron que se aumente el gravamen del IEPS, estos impuestos especiales a la producción y servicios, a los refrescos y a las bebidas con altos niveles calóricos.
As the soda industry doubled down in Mexico, so did public health advocates. They proposed doubling the tax to 20%, the ideal rate for reducing soda consumption.
Logramos un impuesto de 10%, $1 por litro, y no es suficiente, tiene que aumentar a los niveles que la Organización Mundial de la Salud recomienda. El impuesto tendría que ser de un 20% para que la reducción fuera importante.
We were very active, like in networks, doing interviews. I was writing editorials for web pages, and then I received some messages that were a little bit disturbing. I thought it was something like a Twitter troll just attacking me in a personal way.
Cuando nosotros promovíamos el aumento del impuesto a 20%, yo recibí un mensaje en mi teléfono celular, un SMS, que decía que viera una información que acababa de aparecer en la revista Proceso, que es una revista política muy importante en México, y venía un link. Yo abrí el link y me llevó a la página de la funeraria Galloso. Entonces yo ahí lo que pensé es que eso era una amenaza, lo vi como una amenaza. Nosotros teníamos ya 2 años trabajando con seguridad digital y el protocolo era que yo tenía que preguntar a todos los de mi organización y de organizaciones o personas con las que trabajamos si alguno había recibido un mensaje similar.
In a meeting in the Congress, I talked with some of the other speakers, and we realized that it was something common to all the people that was advocating for the soda tax. So that was even more scary.
Death threats to public health researchers, it has the same effect that it has with journalists. It's a tool to try to silence people. Why can't we solve or discuss public interest topics without resorting to these tactics? It's just, it worries me as a citizen.
The public health activists who were targeted sent their phones to Citizen Lab, a research group that investigates illegal surveillance, who discovered somebody had attacked their phones with spyware.
The sugary beverage industry makes a lot of money, and there are a lot of corrupt politicians and government agencies that have a stake in it, and so they really wanted to get inside and neutralize this campaign. It turned out that there were several scientists who were being targeted by a company called the NSO Group. One of the people, we were able to retrieve his phone and look through all of his text messages, and I show this just simply as an illustration of the lengths to which whoever was behind this took to try to convince him to click on those links, which thankfully he did not. So you see there are messages about court cases, maybe these involve you, you're being sued, there are papers that mention you, even some really rude ones I won't get into about his wife. The last one, which I've blown up here, which I thought was really remarkable, said, Mr. Simon, your daughter was just in an accident. She's in grave condition. I hope you can come. Here is where she is hospitalized. How many of you wouldn't want to click on that?
The technology itself is sophisticated. It begins with a text message sent to a potential victim. The phone's camera, the microphone, text messages, and anything else done on the phone or close to it are susceptible to monitoring. The phone becomes a spy in the pocket.
Entonces todo esto indica que venía el gobierno y nosotros decimos que era gente del gobierno ligada a la industria dándole servicio a Coca-Cola o a FEMSA porque son los que han estado haciendo campañas en contra nuestra.
It had an effect on my activities. I had a lot of concern on how unsafe this could be for my family. It affected my work.
El espionaje en México se ha convertido en un mecanismo efectivo de intimidación.
Lo primero que tendría yo que decir es que Enrique Peña Nieto tiene que dar explicaciones.
Que estoy queriendo
Afirmar primero que el gobierno no tiene ninguna participación en ningún tipo de espionaje contra ninguna persona.
Well, this is a very serious situation. What Enrique Peña Nieto, the Mexican president, said, well, the citizens who have been spied on, it's not the government, should bring their complaint to the Attorney General's office, which of course is the institution being accused of spying on them, for the Attorney General to investigate. So basically, he's just backing up, denying that the Mexican government is doing any of this. And this kind of spying activities makes us think that the Mexican government is not defending civil society, but actually participating in the attack on civil society.
Trabajar por la salud puede llegar a ser muy peligroso. Pero lo que ha pasado con los investigadores y con los científicos, con los activistas y con los políticos que estaban trabajando en el impuesto, es que decidimos salir públicos ante este problema y le vamos a echar el doble de las ganas porque queremos que haya una mejor salud para el país.
There's a fight, a revolution within the field of nutrition and health. What are we doing in terms of our processed food environment? But you can't have any form of societal intervention until the public is educated. We are trying to turn this chronic disease around.
The confessions of a former Coca-Cola executive, a man who says he wants everyone to know about the way sugary sodas have been marketed in this country to adults and to children. And his reason, he says guilt.
A lot of people who have spent a lot of time selling a lot of Cokes have some karma debt that they feel like they owe. I certainly do.
The company focused on teenagers, Hispanics, and African Americans because that was the growth market.
Because it represented a lifetime of opportunity.
I am not against soft drinks per se, but what I am for is a balance of power, and I think the power has shifted in the wrong direction. The resources, the scale, the intelligence, the strategy that those companies use is absolutely intense.
Economic power readily translates into political power. These newer threats do not neatly fit the biomedical model that has historically guided public health responses. Who really governs the policies that shape our health?
Those companies have a lot of influence in every country. The greater their sales, the more influence they have. They have bigger impact on the economy. They have more political clout. In a place like China, they're anticipating huge increases in diabetes. Right now, 10% of Chinese have diabetes, 30% have pre-diabetes. This is going to have a big impact. It's very important for countries to try to nip this problem in the bud when you know the outcome is so predictable. And the poorer the country, the bigger the challenge.
But what I am for today is trying to use exactly some of the strategies that they use and convert it jujitsu to healthier products. You know what I want to be? I want to be the brand manager of tap water.
I quit soda about 15 years ago.
10 years ago.
2 years ago.
5 días. Mi relación contigo ha terminado, refresco.
I will drink water.
I will drink water as an act of defiance.
As an act of defiance.
Health activists are sounding the alarm about the global epidemic of diabetes, while industry blocks solutions. Because governments are stifled or conflicted, a growing grassroots movement is taking hold.
Many young people born after the year 2000 have a 1 in 3 chance of contracting type 2 in their lifetime. For Black and Latino youth,
last Saturday, I was at the UC Davis Chicano Chicana
Youth Leadership Conference. Me traje mi novia, Canzilla.
We're really trying to take our work to the streets, and we're doing one of our new public actions for the bigger picture called Canzilla, where we bring this massive inflatable can of soda right into the heart of the high school itself, right in the middle of Quad.
Half of all Black and Latino youth today are expected to get type 2 diabetes in their lifetime is no joke. Yes, so we must get healthy, right?
This is street-style counter-branding. Just down the street is a massive Coca-Cola billboard that sells Coke as happiness. Juxtaposed, we have the truth.
Mexico's highly successful campaign showed others around the world that it is indeed possible to push back against the influence of industry. Meanwhile, the number of deaths add up. During Peña Nieto's presidency, another 600,000 died of type 2 diabetes, a preventable and manageable disease.
He cambiado mi alimentación, sí. Coca casi ya no la tomo, pero ya no me sabe igual a Coca si la estoy tomando tan seguido.
Estoy consciente del daño que hace, o sea, sí tiene también que ver la dieta, la comida, la alimentación.
My friends, I try to say, do not make for you, make for your children.
La felicidad no se compra con dinero a veces, sino se compra con el corazón. Entonces, esto es para que la gente y mi gente que yo ayudo, es para que esté bien espiritualmente, y bien con su alma, y bien con su familia.
In 2018, Mexico elected a new president. Health activists issued a demand that the new government enact conflict of interest-free policies that promote the nation's health.
Esto de ganar dinero haciéndole daño a la gente es lo que no podemos aceptar, ¿no? Como sociedad.
Incoming President López Obrador agreed that a spiritual cleansing of the country was in order. At his inauguration, a shaman performed a ritual healing ceremony, symbolizing purification of the country.
Aquí, en el Zócalo de la Ciudad de México, reafirmo el compromiso de no mentir, no robar y no traicionar al pueblo de México. Lo que buscamos, lo que anhelamos, la purificación de la vida pública de México.
How Mexico handles this health crisis will determine its future. ¡Viva México! Long